So good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm Mark, as Marcus said, and I'm here to talk to you all about driving a transformation at scale. So again, Canva, it's a design software company with some big goals. Some of these goals are around enabling users all around the world, different languages, different locations, different use cases. We support small businesses, large enterprises, individual designers, students, teachers, and many more. So to realize the goals that we have, one of the most important things to the business is speed. And these are some of the charts representing what it's like to work at Canva. We see massive growth in lots of different numbers. And operating at speed is really hard as you grow, as you scale. So a lot of the numbers that I work with, the charts like these shaped charts, are around the numbers of users we have, the volume of data we deal with, the rate of engineers making changes to the code base, the number of features we support, the number of use cases we have to care about when it comes to quality and testing. So in an environment like this, processes inevitably slow down. Or not inevitably, processes will slow down as complexity increases unless we're actively seeking to identify and improve and remove those sources of friction. So my job is to be across quality, but it's not just solving quality problems. The highest level goal that I have is how we can go faster and faster, improving dev speed, improving the way we ship features without risking or reducing quality. And then when it comes to automated testing, which is what I'm talking about today, I have a really strong opinion. The key value proposition of automated testing is not so much preventing regressions, it's about enabling dev speed, enabling developer teams to go as fast as possible safely. They know what they're doing, they have confidence in the safety net that exists, and they can commit code, go to production, move on. That's what we want to happen. So when I started on this project, our release process kind of like this. It's in a pretty good state. It was stable, it was predictable. We were successfully deploying to production every single day. We had strong CI, we had reliable automated tests, we had that daily schedule going. So things were pretty good from many aspects. But there were gaps in the automation coverage, and those gaps were filled by a manual regression testing phase. So our releases would go through the CI process, the builds would all be green, they'd get deployed to a staging environment, and then we'd contract with a outsourcing company to run a battery of scripted manual tests, the same tests, regression testing, the same features every single day. And when those tests were complete, we would be ready to deploy to production. So this is probably familiar to a lot of you here. It's a fairly typical setup. And my challenge is also fairly typical. How can we speed up this process? How can we release more often? How can we do deployments in a better, faster way? So the blocker for going faster is that manual testing phase. And the cost of doing manual testing from a dollar point of view is fairly low. Like, we're not spending much money. Contractors outsourcing doesn't really cost that much in the scheme of things. So we weren't looking to save dollars, but the cost to speed was really high. So that necessary step of running manual tests took half a day or more in the process. It blocked our path to more frequent deployments. So the way forward is pretty clear. We needed to eliminate manual testing from the release process. And something I really want to be clear on here, like, we're not looking to remove manual testing as a concept from the company altogether. It's still really important to have humans interacting with the new features you're building, making sure that they are functional, that the UX is good, that they do what the humans expect them to do. That's a key part of development processes at Canva. But repeating the same scripts over and over again, every day, on every release, on older features that haven't changed, that's not where we're adding value. That's not where humans are sort of useful in the process. So automation is clearly the answer here. You should be automating those regression tests, not having humans run them. And that was a key opportunity for us to improve the way that we deploy, improve the dev speed, improve the rate of deployments by building automated solutions to that manual testing process, but also driving process changes and cultural changes across the company, the way we approach automated testing, the way we approach manual testing, and that high-level goal of speed. The simplest thing to do, delete the manual tests, replace them by automation. Easy. But the manual tests, we couldn't just delete them. They were testing important user flows, critical user flows in complex areas where it's not easy to write automated tests. With design software, we're looking at scenarios like visual content, video content. We support different mobile platforms. We have lots of third-party integrations. These are complicated problems, genuinely hard to automate. But a large number of the tests weren't that complicated. They were just easier to write than automated tests at the time they were written. So in some cases, the reason why we had automated tests was just lack of attention. They were written to meet a deadline, they were written to go fast, but they weren't necessarily the best way of doing things. So our first step was to really understand the reasons why automated tests exist, see whether those reasons were still valid, and then build the solutions to those problems. So some of the challenges were technical. We just didn't have a framework that supported the scenario that needed to be tested. Sometimes it was lack of knowledge. The team members on the teams didn't know the best way of doing testing. They didn't have the experience. They didn't have the expertise. Often it was a factor just of tight deadlines, tight timelines. Writing the automated test, the team knows that that's the best thing to do, that the pragmatic way forward, writing manual test scripts, is just easier, faster, and allows them to meet those tight deadlines, even if it then has that long-term ongoing cost. And finally, sometimes it's just inertia. The tests were being run every day by an outsourcing company. So once we'd written them inside the company, we kind of forgot about them. They were just there. They ran day after day. We didn't interact with them. We didn't change them. They weren't necessarily testing what was most valuable anymore. They were testing something that was valuable 3, 4, 5 years ago. So they were not providing much value, but we didn't have a driver to review, revisit, improve. They just existed. So now at this point, we have a pretty good understanding of the journey ahead of us, the problem to solve. But the question is, how do we do that? How do we fix it across a system that is large and complex? So the code base is more than 100 different components owned by different teams. The dependencies are deeply interconnected. And the testing is covering end-to-end scenarios, complex steps, complex journeys through the product, covering lots of different visual, audio, video type content. And the stakes are also really high. We have more than 200 million active users all around the world. And if we break something, if something breaks, then the cost is reputational and operational and could potentially be massive. So if we removed the manual tests and as a result we shipped a high impact bug, that would be the opposite of success for our project. The other reason why the complexity is there is because all of these teams wanted to deploy to production on their own schedule. They wanted to make a change that they were confident in and ship it to production to get their results and iterate on that as fast as possible. But they couldn't do that. They all relied on this manual safety net. They all relied on this daily process. Even if they didn't have manual tests, they needed to go through that wait of 24 hours on staging, lots of testing, get the green light before their change could go to production. So the vision is not just remove manual regression tests, that's almost the easy bit, but it was to enable independent deployments across all teams and to do that in a safe, reliable way. Teams being able to ship at their own pace, not being blocked by shared release gates. So we needed to identify, classify, and remove the reasons why the manual tests existed, and not just the past reasons why they were written in the past, but the reasons why we were still writing them, the reasons why we were writing them in the future. So from a technical point of view, we needed to build new automation frameworks to support the various scenarios. We needed to remove the old scripted tests without dropping coverage. And we needed to address the prioritization and planning that goes into how teams build their work, how they approach their features, and how they build the tests. So the real challenge that we were solving was changing the culture of testing and quality across all of the dev teams. Again, more than 2,000 engineers. So that was the vision, pretty clear at this point. This is the structured approach of how we drove that change across the organization. So talking about buy-in, visibility, execution, culture, and how it evolved over time. The culture change was the most important thing. We weren't going to solve this by having a small team of superstars writing automated tests for everyone else. That was not even an option. We wanted to solve it by making it possible and easy for all teams to own and write their own automated tests at the right time in their processes. Teams that have the context of the features they're writing, they have the deep understanding of what their users expect. Those are the teams that should be writing and owning the automated and manual tests. So the high-level approach that we followed here was to get buy-in for this vision, get buy-in for what we were trying to do, break the problem down into manageable pieces and really work on the ownership of those pieces. Make that ownership explicit, make it visible, make it clear, and to give the data to the decision makers, make the progress, or make the journey ahead and the progress we were making visible. My job was then to communicate around that, like get the buy-in, get the momentum, drive the momentum, and deliver the results by defining what the expectations were. And this played out over many months, more than a year, several planning cycles, during several org changes, and of course the ongoing pressure to actually build features and ship features. We weren't ever going to stop development to focus entirely on writing automated tests. It needed to be done in parallel. So step one was aligning the stakeholders. We had the top level support, we had the leadership support in what we were trying to do. Like the goal of unlocking faster deployments had full buy-in. But we needed to translate that into actual support from the teams doing the work, the engineering managers, the product teams, the engineers, the QAs, and frame it all in terms of roadmap priorities that they could accept, that they could build into their planning, that they could build into their roadmaps. So we did this by talking a lot about the why, framing it in terms of benefit for you as a development team. Like this is something that would benefit each and every team, something that would allow you to speed up your development cycles, enable you to ship faster. And what we found was, in general, teams were very supportive of that goal. Like it's obviously a win-win situation. But the team concerns were more about the details. It was impossible for them. It was a challenge for them. They couldn't do it because of this reason or this other reason. So we really listened to those concerns, especially when the challenge of automating a particular scenario was described as impossible. We had to make it possible before we could ask teams to commit to this goal. Step two is about ownership. And our model at Canva is that all feature teams are accountable for the quality of the work that they do, the features that they own, the tests as well as the production code. So from the start, the strategy was that we needed all teams to buy into this and make their own decisions on the way forward to realize the goal. So in many cases, that was just to commit to writing automated tests, the simple bit, replacing the manual tests with automated tests. But there were other options too that we offered to teams, different recommendations for testing, monitoring outside of the CI loop, or breaking down ownership so that instead of the end-to-end flows covering multiple journeys, multiple components, each team was testing only the parts that they had responsibility for. So we made it clear that every team that owned the manual regression tests had some work to do, and our job as the project team was to support them to do it. So part of that was just raising tickets for the work to be done, which was helpful for the teams because it gave them clarity on what was expected, helpful for me, helpful for us as the project team, because we were then able to really closely track how we were doing, the progress we were making, the work that was flowing through and the work that was getting stuck. We were able to offer guidance, tools, new frameworks to follow through. Our job was to make the path clear for all of the teams to follow and then to unblock that path so that they could do that. Step 3 was around data and dashboards. So building the dashboards was possibly the thing that accelerated progress the most. So showing the data, breaking it down by team, by department, by leader, so that everyone knew where things stood, everyone could understand the work to be done, the volume of work to be done, but also who was responsible for doing it. And just by providing that data to the decision makers, making that data visible to teams, encouraged them to take action. In many cases, they corrected the ownership, they updated the tests to be more valuable, they removed the tests that were no longer needed or had become obsolete. So in many cases, the teams came and said to us, like, they didn't actually know that they owned these manual tests, they didn't know they existed, they weren't actually providing them with any value. So giving them the data, giving them the dashboards, putting the data in front of people sparked action. It got the ball rolling. As time passed, my job became more about tracking the progress and celebrating the wins and sharing with my stakeholders how we were doing. So we really spend a lot of time syncing every week, looking at the data, looking at the remaining blockers and sending out comms to the business, repeating and emphasizing the message on why we're doing it, why it's important, what we needed to happen, what the expectation was, and backing that up with charts and visuals. So we used company meetings, we used Slack channels, especially when we were delivering something new and exciting, like a new framework that allowed us to test something complicated. But we also use personal networks, regular catch-ups with people with responsibilities to seek their support, to highlight concerns, to keep the visibility high, the attention on this important project, see the importance of the small wins and the incremental progress, but also find out what the challenges were and make sure we were leaning in and helping to solve. There was a game aspect to this too. Often we were celebrating the teams making progress, but in a subtle way, we were putting pressure on the teams that weren't making progress. And because we had these charts and leaderboards, nobody really wanted to be at the bottom of that leaderboard, the one that was not making progress towards this shared goal. Our goal was not to just solve the immediate problem and build the frameworks and move the tests. Our goal was to change the culture going forward, make sure that test automation was seen as an important, valuable goal for everyone, and to give strong discouragement for the quick win solution of just adding a new manual test as a crutch. So how we did that was, first of all, just to set up a notification rule in the code base, so that every time someone added a new manual test, we got notified. We knew it was happening. We could go and talk to them and understand why. Over time, that alert turned into an approval step. We actually said we will give approval to teams that need to add a manual test, but you need to talk to us first. And eventually that evolved into strong guidance that adding new manual tests was no longer an option, wasn't permitted. We left room for exceptions, like if you came and talked to me and said, I need an exception, that was fine. But actually no teams asked for any exceptions. They adjusted, they adapted, they found a new way of doing things to give them the coverage they needed through automation, monitoring, and other solutions. So the biggest challenge that I faced wasn't the technical side, it wasn't resistance to the goal, it was priority. Teams had their own roadmaps, their own deliverables. They agreed with the high-level outcome that we wanted, but they had to balance that with their own deadlines and pressures. And we weren't top-down enforcers. We weren't giving them mandates that this had to happen. We were one voice among many other voices asking teams to take on meaningful but non-trivial work. So we really had to be respectful of that. We had to be persistent on what we wanted and clear about why it mattered and show that we were supporting teams, not just asking them to do our work for us. So as it was a long-running project, we allowed the space for teams to make their own choices, to set their own schedules, make room for other dates, other projects, other priorities, but also continually driving attention onto this one. So we were making requests, we were adding tickets, work to be done, we were driving the discussion, but letting the teams make their own decisions. We knew that we were going to remove the manual testing phase. We had a pretty good idea of when we were going to do it, but we didn't start off by telling teams that that was the day, telling teams that they had to do it. We started off with a soft approach and then escalated that over time. We weren't asking teams to drop their work to meet our deadlines. The other aspect, of course, was the technical side. We weren't writing the automated tests for the feature teams, but we did need to support them on that technical level. So we set up a brand new team, Quality Platform. Their mission was to enable and uplift all of the other teams when it came to automation. That team had the mission of delivering the frameworks that we needed, supporting the different flows, testing sound, video, mobile devices. One by one, we were able to remove the reasons teams were saying their task was impossible. We were building the solutions. We were making it possible for them. We weren't just throwing solutions at teams. We were working with them. We were pairing with them. We were unblocking technical gaps, but also giving strong, confident, opinionated advice on the right way of doing things. So often it wasn't so much that the test was impossible to automate. It was the test was covering too much. It was doing an end-to-end flow, covering the third-party integrations. It was testing everything inside to make sure that everything worked exactly as we expect it to, which is generally a good approach when it comes to manual testing because you can do that. But with automated testing, you don't want brittle tests covering an end-to-end journey. You want to be testing things in isolation. You want to use mocks, use monitoring, use... the key insight is that CI is not the right place to test integrations or end-to-end flows of integrations. You test the components in isolation, you test the boundaries between those components, and then you have confidence that you've tested the entire journey without testing the entire journey. So as a project team, we provided very clear guidance, documented guidance on the best way of testing, the way that we recommended, how to break down the complex flows, and we really invested a lot of time in teaching teams the right way of doing things, the recommended practices, and getting them to adopt those practices. So testing what really matters. We want to prevent our deployments from breaking code that we own, that we care about as a dev team. What other dev teams are doing, what the third parties are doing, we can't control that. It doesn't make sense to test that in our CI pipeline. So the teams are responsible for testing what they own, and they trust that other teams are doing the same testing on what other teams own. The feedback from teams on this was really positive. So preventing deployments that break, my notes are out of date. The feedback we got was really positive. The teams really appreciated the level of attention we were giving them, the support we were giving them, the fact that we were building solutions for their specific cases, and the fact that we were giving them the data and trust to make their own decisions to meet this goal. So the final step, as I said before, we changed the approach over time. We intentionally designed and executed a phased approach on how we communicated our expectations. So first of all, we just asked teams to help. We gave them the data, we gave them the support, we gave them the power of decision-making when they wanted to do things, understand the technical challenges, have discussions around those technical challenges, and let them prioritize. And in many cases, that was enough. That was where the quick wins happened, teams just doing the right thing because we asked them to and gave them data. After that, we then set a more explicit timeline, a target of 6 months in the future. We asked teams to commit to that date. We thought it was plenty of time for them to work on it, but to let us know what help they needed to get there and partnering with them to make sure they were making progress. So not all teams made it, some teams did, some teams didn't, but the benefit to us was that we deeply understood the technical challenges and the prioritization challenges and made sure that we were building the right solutions for those teams. So the final stage, once we had the confidence that we had built the solutions, we had made the impossible possible, we then and only then set the clear timeline and deadline. So the message was, we will remove the manual regression phase on this date. And if you haven't automated your test, if you haven't found an alternative solution or to address the risk on that date, from that date onwards, your features will be untested. And that is something that you own. That is a risk that you own. We're giving you plenty of warning to take action on it. So we're still offering help, we're still offering support, we're still partnering with these teams, but we offered absolutely no flexibility on that date. So we were able to drive much more forcefully at that point, and in a small number of cases, escalate to leadership for teams that weren't giving us enough confidence that they were going to hit the date, that they were going to be ready for that date. And the leaders obviously cared because they were aware and accountable for that risk of not taking the action. So at that final stage, the stick approach rather than the carrot approach wouldn't have worked at the beginning. It would have been anti-productive. It was crucial for us to be partners first, to gain the support and trust and solve the problems before defining the fixed timeline that everyone else had to follow. So my job as the leader of this change was mostly around keeping the momentum going and communicating. So reinforcing the message, celebrating program, flagging the blockers, being respectful of other business priorities, but persistent in the importance of this specific goal and the specific requests we were making of teams. So I shared monthly progress updates, tied the program into the roadmaps and the delivery channels, and kept on reporting the progress and sometimes the lack of progress to key leaders who had the responsibility over the teams and ownership over those features. There were several surprises, curveballs that popped up over this project as well, aspects that we hadn't considered, changes that we hadn't predicted, changes to the org structures and ownership of the features we cared about, technical challenges we hadn't considered, and cost implications as well. So to keep things on track, I'd constantly go back to the key deliverable. Can we eliminate this manual testing phase on this time frame? And if not, what needs to change to make it possible? So having that clarity around what the goal actually was allowed me to make fast decisions, strong decisions, and consider trade-offs, but also to give clear and confident updates to my own stakeholders about my prediction, my projection of when we were going to do this, how successful we were going to be, and when necessary, get high-level support and influence, if needed, to drive some of that decision-making. So that's how we did it. Now let's talk about success. So we measured success in a number of different ways, but always with data and charts. So tracking the dates, making sure we were clear on the timelines, making projections of what would happen in the future. So these are two interesting charts showing the tests that were blocked and the tests that were unblocked. So the first chart represented the work to be done by the project team, how we unblocked teams so that they could make progress. The second chart is the work to be done by the teams, the work that we were unblocking and the work that needed to be actioned outside of our immediate control. So this was a scary high number from the start of the project. It represented high uncertainty on the journey ahead. But as we delivered solutions, the lines went down in the right direction. We hit our target of removing all of the blockers, and we were able to celebrate that milestone. But actual success had a very clear criteria: 0 manual tests in the release process. And this was our North Star. This was how we had confidence that we were moving in the right direction. So we're not quite there yet. This line is not yet at 0, but it's approaching 0. And I know the rate it's approaching 0. I know the challenge. I know the journey ahead, steps ahead. I have high confidence that we're going to meet the target date and realize the goal. There's probably going to be some curveballs in the coming weeks. There's been a couple this week, but I know now that we have a strong team that's rallying behind this and a track record of solving these problems as they come up. And again, the feedback from the teams on this has been so positive. They love that we're driving improvements through data. They love that we're empowering them to make improvements on the code and tests that they own. So it's not just the outcome we're delivering of faster deployments, but the win is the greater ownership that they feel and the awareness of the state of quality that every team at Canva now has. I'll take you quickly through, I'll recap quickly the takeaways for everyone here today. What really worked well and what made this a successful project. So the first one, capture the why. Convince people it's a worthwhile goal. It's really hard to drive organizational change if the organization doesn't see a need to change. So leadership can set a goal, but it takes the actual teams, the contributors, the engineers to make it happen. The second one is make it visible, using tools, metrics, dashboards to make it real and useful for teams driving action and useful for stakeholders understanding progress. Offer support. As the goal owner, I can't do everything, but I need to understand what help is needed, what blockers there are, what problems teams can predict, and then listen and offer solutions to those problems. Not telling teams what to do, but giving them a real way forward. Ownership needs to be explicit. We can't have a small team making changes. We needed to break down over time. And as a project leader, a huge focus for me on communication and momentum, keeping at a high level, but drilling down to understand and support teams as needed. I will finish there. Thank you so much for listening, and come and talk to me afterwards for the rest of the day. I'd love to hear similar challenges